Hey, everybody. I hope that you are doing well and having a blessed week. My name is Jack Teroni, and I'm the pastor here at Faith United Methodist Church in the Stroudsburg area. And this is Faith Talks, where we're once again diving into some of the most important and pressing questions of our faith. We're trying to understand our relationship with God and with Jesus just a little bit better today. And again, I pray that if you're watching this video or you're, watching the whole series of videos of Faith Talks that we've made and that I've uploaded here to our Facebook or YouTube, or maybe you're watching on our website or whatever social media it is, that you are learning something, that you are being encouraged to take more strident and deeper steps in your faith, or trying to understand all of what this Christian life is all about. That is my prayer. That is why I do these videos, and also to answer some of the most pressing questions that we have. Because when we confront our uncertainties, our misunderstandings, our kind of the gaps in the knowledge that we all have, that's how we grow and we understand how God is working and moving in our lives. So again, that's my goal in doing these, and I hope that you are considering taking next steps. And this might be encouraging for you in some way. And I am going to once again talk about a more difficult subject that comes up when we're talking about the holidays and the Christmas season, and that is, how do we find joy in the middle of it, in the midst of it? Now, for some of you watching, that might not be an issue for you. Maybe you are having a wonderful year so far, and you're excited. Christmas is one of your favorite times of the year. It certainly is one of my favorite times of the year. I love Christmas. I love decorating our church. I love decorating my house. I love seeing Christmas decorations anywhere and everywhere. The beauty of Christmas trees and everything, and especially their pine tree smell too, and and all that joy of Christmas season is all very enjoyable to me. And I always have to remind myself, while this is all beautiful, remember what it is all ultimately about, right? And that is Christ's coming and everything. So I'm talking about that. But for some of you, maybe this is not a fun holiday season for you. Maybe you are hurting and grieving in some way, or you've just had a rough year. And I can speak to that as well. As much as I love the Christmas season, we all go through that in some ways. Sometimes, thinking about some of the harder things that we've gone through this past year or in the last couple of years. I definitely can relate to that in empathy. I carry some grief this year as well. Even though I love like I said, even though I love the holidays and find such joy in this season, in the past year, I've lost family members or other friends and loved ones close to me. Also, this church here, Faith United Methodist Church, the church in which I am blessedly assigned to, has lost some members this year that we are mourning and missing very much. One of the closest, to me is my younger cousin, who I lost this past year. Actually, lost him last New Year's Eve into New Year's Day, and we'll be coming up on the 1 year mark since his passing. And I know what it feels like when the world is supposed to be bright with Christmas lights and celebration, yet sometimes and in some moments your heart feels heavy. If that's you, I see you, I grieve with you, and I'm glad that you're listening or watching this video, right? I want to also acknowledge some other things that have been hard, because this last weekend has been a hard news weekend for our country, but also for our world, really. We've seen a terrible violence in a shooting that happened at, Brown University, where I believe it's two young innocent students were killed and others injured. Then there was another terrible, apparently anti-Semitic attack in Australia on Bondi Beach. And then at the close of the weekend, terrible news about a very famous Hollywood filmmaker, Rob Reiner, and his wife. I consider myself a movie buff, and I love Rob Reiner. So I was sad to see that. His films, such as A Few Good Men, is on like my top 20 favorite movies of all time, and also The Princess Bride. If you know that movie, that's really a good one and a powerful one. When Harry Met Sally, he's had some really good films, and so to see the death of him and his wife, and the tragic circumstances that we're learning about that, it's just very sad. And these events leave us feeling confused, angry, heartbroken, and asking, where is God in all this? I'm sure people closer to those situations are asking that very question if they're Christian right now. And I understand that, and I want to talk about that today because it's hard to kind of weigh the joy that this season is supposed to bring with some of the hurt that we're going through. Let's start by acknowledging the hurt. It's okay. I want to let you know as a pastor, first of all, it's okay to say that you're hurting, that this season doesn't feel very joyful at this moment, right? Or I'm angry. I don't understand, Lord. Why me? Why did this happen? Why is this happening? Please, Lord, show me, as it's said many times, show me the way, right? Or help me understand. This Christian life that we live does not, you know, demand that we put on a smile every single moment when we're going through heartbreak or, of any kind. And in fact, Scripture gives us, honest accounts and honest, moments of people who grieve, who wept, who mourn, and many times people of faith. One that I constantly come back to when I'm talking about grief in general is how David, King David cries out in the Psalms. He says, My tears have been my food by day and by night," right? It's a powerful word right there, but just goes to show you he's elaborating how much his pain or grief has taken him. Grief isn't unchristian, it's human, okay? People sometimes get those confused, right? Or say, no, if you're gonna be a loving supporter of Jesus Christ, you can't ever grieve, or you can't ever, let people see that you're hurting or that you feel bad. And that is simply not true. Jesus himself wept at the tomb of Lazarus, right? Grief is real. So we begin with presence of God, right? Presence, with our pain, and presence with one another. First thing, presence of God, the idea that God is going to come alongside us and maybe show us something beautiful amidst the pain that we're going through. He can do that by giving us other people who love and support us, other people who in our faith are going to come alongside us and say, hey, you're going through a hard time right now, but I'm going to be right here. I may not solve it in one moment. I may not take all the pain that you have away, ever, but I'm going to be right here for you. I'm going to be your shoulder to cry on if you need. I'm going to be the one to help you go through these things. However you need, I'm going to be there for you. Why? Because I love you. I love you so much, right? That's exactly the world that Jesus was stepping into when he was born, more along the lines of the opposite, actually, because people were not doing exactly that. We'll slow down and step into that world for a second too, because if we don't understand the context of the nativity, then we won't understand why this mattered and so much of Jesus is coming and why Christmas is so important. So when the Gospel Luke tells us that Jesus was born in the days of Caesar Augustus, that's, not just a timestamp, okay? That's actually a warning label. Why? Because it's the Roman world. And the Roman world, if, sometimes uh, some people ask me to sum it up, and I'm not a history major by any event, but all the things that I've learned about how the Roman world operated, it's three things: power, control, and fear. The Roman world was built on domination. Peace, what they oftentimes called Pax Romana, right, was not necessarily peace as some of us are blessed to understand it as today. Peace in that time was really enforced silence. Okay, it was peace that was achieved through threat, violence, and any kind of resistance was just crushed down and everything. They taxed heavily. They were occupied militarily. They demanded loyalty, not just politically, but also spiritually. Right. A lot of their leaders became, divine figures to the people because of what was just pushed around them. Caesar was often treated as divine, for ordinary people, especially Jewish families like Mary and Joseph, right? Life was under, constant threat, constant pressure, anxiety. You kept your head down, you didn't challenge the authority, you survived, but you didn't flourish, right? So people were longing for a sense of freedom, a sense of justice and deliverance. They were upset with their kings, aggravated by their leaders who, were getting consumed by, this these ideas from the devil. Do not give to other people. You don't have to care about them. You don't have to love them. You don't have to serve them as their leader. You can do whatever you want, right? And that's why people were longing for something else, for justice, for deliverance. And they prayed for God to act, like really act decisively, and God did. How did God act? He gave us Jesus, right? He arrived, Jesus was arriving in that desperation, right? Same with King Herod, by the way. And Herod plays a key role in, the accounts of the Nativity. He's another one I want to focus on too. So I'm gonna, go down here to some of the notes that I have on Herod. He ruled Judea as a client king for Rome, and that means that he held power only as long as Rome was allowing him to. And what we know about Herod specifically, if you want to look specifically from the Nativity, I mean, there's not much good to share about him otherwise outside of the Nativity story, but he was a paranoid man. It constantly tells us he was ruthless, he was violent, he was constantly, feeling like he had this inferiority complex that he had to change, right? And history tells us that he tragically executed members of his own family because he feared they might take his throne. So, someone wrote this interesting. So when the Magi later ask, "Where is the child who has been born the King of the Jews?" that question doesn't make Herod nervous, or doesn't just make Herod nervous, it terrifies him. That's very, very true. It did. It did. It terrified him because tyrants are always afraid of losing, control or just trying to gain more. And so, unable to live without those things, right? They're just trying to take more and more. So his response to the birth of Jesus is, not necessarily any kind of curiosity or wonder. What is it? Violence, but he maliciously says, "Oh, go and find him so that I may come and worship him too." Did he really intend to do that? No. He wanted to go find him so that he could kill him, right? Matthew tells us that, Herod ordered the slaughter of innocent children in Bethlehem. Mothers weep, there's families shattered, fear fills the land. So that was, the intentions he truly had for Jesus were no exception. But here we go, right? This is where this is the world that Christmas enters into, right? Not any kind of peaceful winter night, but a world aching with injustice, grief, and bloodshed. Does it sound familiar? It should, right? Now, another thing I want to focus on in the Nativity story, and that's important because it's Mary and Joseph. Mary carrying carrying the Son of God in her womb, going to bring so much peace and joy, but them themselves so strong and brave, going through what they went through, very young, pregnant under circumstances that put both their reputations at risk, their safety at risk, and their future. Joseph had chosen faithfulness to Mary over social acceptance. That many people call it, social acceptance, and that, go in and divorce her, or, he is not truly the father of the baby that she is carrying. But, that choice comes at a cost. Then comes the decree from Caesar. Everyone must return to their ancestral hometown to be counted. For Mary and Joseph, that means traveling roughly 90 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem. That's a long, long journey, uh, you know, over rough terrain, and especially Mary being near the end of her pregnancy, almost every single step would have been uncomfortable. You think about that journey. Every, mile is heavy with worry. That's got to be hard for them. And you imagine yourself putting yourself into that situation. Would you be able to do it? Hopefully, prayerfully, by the grace of God. But I say that because that's exactly what they were both relying on, God to get them through the journey. And when they finally arrive, they're tired, they're sore, they're vulnerable. Is there a nice place for them to go? Oh no, of course not. There's no room for them at any place in town. And so Jesus enters the world already experiencing a sense of rejection, if you will, right? He's born, he's the son of God. He's going to be a king, but he's not even born in a palace or a home, but in a place meant for animals, right? He begins life among the lowest, the overlooked, the forgotten. And the same thing kind of continues on with the story of all who were told to go and find him and seek him out. Shepherds who get the news first, not emperors, kings, priests in the temple. God sent angels to shepherds. And back at that time too, by the way, I'm gonna flip the story on shepherds. Shepherds are beautiful, beautiful people in that they lead and that they care and that they shelter and everything. But the world or the society of the time didn't really see them that way. They were not considered reliable. They were unclean. They were marginalized. Their testimony, according to Greco-Roman law, their testimony wasn't even admissible in court. So not very high up people at the time. Yet the angels appeared to the shepherds and they say, "Don't be afraid. I bring you good news of great joy for all the people, for all the people." This is not just for the powerful. This is not just for any elite, not just for the successful and the stable. Jesus is being born for those who go through life's everyday problems or everyday woes, for the grieving and the afraid, especially for those living on the edges of society and hope, right? That's exactly what, that's exactly who God is speaking to in these moments. Jesus was needed then, very much so, because the world was broken. And Jesus is still needed today very much because the world is broken. Jesus was needed because power at that time had become abusive, fear ruled hearts, violence was normalized, hope seemed to be fading. And then God brought an incarnation of Jesus in this form of a small child. And that child would grow up to preach mercy instead of revenge, right? A child who would, touch the untouchable, right? He was going to forgive his enemies, do good works, and absorb and stop violence rather than inflict it. That's what all the things that he was going to do, right? Heal the sick, feed the hungry, and tell other people to do this. He was going to be a different kind of king. God enters pain to redeem it, not necessarily to avoid it. That's why Christmas matters when we all hurt. Because, and I was just talking about this in the last, week when I did my sermon on Sunday of this last week. We're, talking about fun Advent hymns and everything and what they can teach us, right? And I said this same sentence: joy doesn't come from pretending everything is fine. It comes from knowing that God is with us even when everything is not so very fine, right? So, what is joy? How might we define joy? That's a key thing that I want to talk about real quick too. Joy is the absence of sorrow. It's the promise of God's presence in the midst of sorrow. And that's something that I want us all to at least try to find this holiday season. Might be the hardest thing you've ever had to do. I'm not saying that to just, drama things up or, play it off like it's, some big revelation or everything. I'm saying that because sometimes joy is very hard to find in the midst of our grief, in the midst of our suffering, whatever it is that is on our hearts, right? But one thing, and I found this a couple of things on a blog post I was reading on Christianity Today, about this very thing because, they acknowledge as well that finding joy in the holiday season can be hard, but so necessary for the Christian journey. And they listed some ways that it might be good to tend to our hearts with this season. One of them, the first thing that they talked about is this. They say, practice presence over pressure. So, this idea that you don't necessarily have to perform happiness, but you can choose to just be present with God and with people, listening, praying, and caring. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier in this video. Those of us who want to love each other, the way Christ loved us, right? That is a commandment, his ultimate, commandment to us all, right? And, we want to be the people who are going to come alongside someone else and say, hey, I'm praying for you. I know this is hard, but I'm here for you. I'm here with you. And whatever you need, I'm going to be here for you. Right? If we all just did that more, then so many of the world's problems would be, substantially less, I would argue, just with small acts like that, right? The second thing they say to do is this. They say, name your struggles. So that I would interpret. They don't give too much detail, but that I would, interpret as, be think about what truly is bothering you and confront those things in your heart. Don't let, them just don't bury them down or just try and hide them somewhere else. Confront the struggles that you have in your life. Talk about your grief with someone who will listen to you, right? Sometimes naming the pain is the first step towards real healing, right? What are you mad, and that's how we do that, right? Any therapist or psychologist will say that. Let's get to the core of what is bothering you so that then we can try and fix it. And do that with someone you trust. If you need me to, another minister, or practiced a religious official, or psychologist, or just someone you trust, right? Do that, right? That is our job. That is the purpose that God has blessed us with. Um, what else do they say? They say offer compassion, not pity, right? And that's important very much, right? We need to be taught by our faith how to love our neighbors as ourselves. That starts with empathy, owning the pain of others as we would own, without minimizing or comparing, right? That's important too. Choose small acts of love is the next one. Choose small acts of love. Well, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, right? And joy isn't always going to be this kind of revelation or mountaintop experience. Sometimes it's just sharing a meal with somebody, or it's just, writing, down in a Christmas card to them saying, hey, want you to know I'm thinking about you and I love you very, very much. I was, something simple that happened just a few days ago, last week actually. There was one of our members who was not doing so well. She's, struggling with some of the uh, recent health diagnoses of her nephew and everything. And I was just talking with her because, she's very concerned and everything. And when I woke up one day last week, I can't remember exactly which day, but, I woke up thinking about this person who, I'm praying for and thinking about very much. And I thought, even though it's early, I'm just gonna shoot her a quick text. I was like, she's probably almost up, by now. And so I did. I opened my phone and just said, hey, how are you? Just want you to know I'm thinking about you. How are things? Is there anything I can do? And she texted me back and she was like, thank you for reaching out so early in the morning. Just that you're thinking about me. It means a lot. She was like, thank you. And it's going okay, and yada yada yada. And then we, went on and everything. And I didn't even think about it at first, but I just thought, okay, that's good. That I did something good here in this moment. I let her know that I was there and that I was thinking about her and praying for her and her family. And she recognized that and she took that to heart. It made her feel better. It made her feel good. So good. Keep, think about that, how you can do more of those things, right? Before even the day starts. Think about, a couple people who you just want to reach out to and say, hey, I want you to know I love you and I'm thinking about you. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, whatever it is. I love you and I'm thinking about you, right? Tending to these moments can be, really just good small steps to loving actions that open our hearts to God once again. So choose small acts of love. That's what I would say. And the last thing they said here is that remember that God loves you, of course. So important. The heart of this season is that God loves you so much that God came near you in the form of his son. He didn't stay, distant and safe in heaven. He got into the mess of life with us. And that reality is bigger than any of the hurt, that we face, right? So remember those things, right? And remember also these real world stories of love and forgiveness in life. And I just pray that, even some of those who cause the most atrocious acts, we might show love and care to, as hard as it is, even though we might struggle with forgiveness. And, I hope to do a whole nother talk or a whole nother even sermon series here at the church at some point soon about, forgiveness and how necessary it is, but at the same time, how difficult it is. But, our world is not necessarily abstract in that sense, but practical. We need to be thinking about it when communities come together to support the wounded and the grieving, maybe like what the Jewish community is doing right now, and prayerfully all the communities too, all the faith communities of the world, in yet another act of anti-Semitism, in the world when it's on the rise. A lot of religious hate, in all categories, is on the rise, unfortunately, in this world, and we got to address that too. But they all now are coming together to support those who were wounded and, honor those who have passed in the midst of their grief. That is beautiful to see. That's God working in that community. Or maybe when strangers open their homes to those who are, displaced by fear or whatever else it is, wherever in the world, right? That's a Christian calling as well. Maybe families, like I've talked about, families who have lost loved ones who choose to speak, not necessarily out of revenge, but out of continued love. Maybe when a family member of someone who's been lost to a terrible act says, "I forgive you, the perpetrator, because I believe you need help, and that's what I am called to do in love, is to forgive you." That's a strong, strong spirit, and one that, we should work on emulating or learning about more, right? All of these things make it just so moving and wonderful. One last thing I'll share because as I've talked about, in this season, as hard as it's been and everything, and just in the news this past weekend, I thought to a quote from the movie The Princess Bride, directed by Rob Reiner, who we've just lost along with his wife. And I just want to note that I really do believe that his films remind us that, love and humor and the messy yet beautiful life is really worth celebrating. And The Princess Bride is a great example of that. But one thing that said in the movie, talking about the two main characters, is that, and I wrote it down. I mean, death cannot stop true love. All it can do is delay it for a while. And I was like, ah, it's so beautiful. Maybe that's what the Christmas story teaches us. Love doesn't end at the grave. Love endures, comes to us even in the darkness. And we could dive right into, that verse from Corinthians, love is kind, love is patient, right? We need to honor the, you know, legacy of those who have passed by remembering those human stories. Funny, sometimes painful, even romantic like this one. But at the end of the day, I as a Christian like to think that they all point us back to the greatest story of all, which is God's love for us in Jesus. So this Christmas, as I close this video and everything, I've talked a lot, spoke a lot of words at you and everything. But what I really want you to remember this Christmas is that we all, whether we're going through a hard time or maybe we're having the most joyous year ever, whatever it is, bless you and God loves you, and that is wonderful. But I want our hearts to find the quiet assurance that Jesus always brought. Not any kind of superficial happiness and what we buy at the store or anything like that, or not at the same time also not any kind of denial of pain, but the deep and unshakable joy of God with us. And what does that, translate to, by the way? Emmanuel, right? God with us. So think about that. Think about finding those joyful moments however you can. This Christmas, call someone who you haven't spoken to in a while. or reach out to them and say, "Hey, I love you and I'm thinking about you." Go and, find some community with the people that you love. Go somewhere on Christmas Day, where you'll feel loved and welcomed. Share a meal, a nice Christmas meal with somebody, right? Open some gifts or give some gifts, in the spirit of Christmas, right? That's a blessed thing to do and be able to do as well. And just try and enjoy the season as much as you possibly can, because remembering that Christ is with us is how we can find not just joy, but hope, peace, and of course, love. Why don't we share a prayer as we close this time? Let's pray. God of comfort and hope, I just ask that you be with those who grieve, be with those whose hearts are heavy with sadness, anger, fear, or loss, whatever it is. Just remind us again that you came to walk with us in every struggle, and that your heart is greater than all of our hurt. I just ask you that you help us to be bearers of your mercy, agents of forgiveness, Lord, and witness to your joy that no darkness can overcome. Help us to find those things in the Christmas season and bless us all the way through. Be with those who are hurting and sick, those who feel isolated, those who grieve, or those who just need that sense. We are here for them, and together we will find that joy together, the joy that you have continually blessed us with your Son, Jesus Christ. And it's in his name that I pray this prayer that you taught us to pray through him, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Friends, I hope that you found this video meaningful to you in some way. I hope that it encouraged you to maybe take some steps in your faith, encouraged you to ask some more questions about, whatever it is, the world that we're going through right now, the story of the Nativity, how Jesus was born, what that means for our faith and for all of us. It all connects. And so that I hope that maybe you'll take some further steps in your journey this day or this week and this new year that we're about to enter into, right? Let that be an encouragement for you. If you have any questions that you'd like answered, or questions that you want me to talk more about, or just questions that you have, please reach out through one of the communication channels that's on our website here on Facebook, YouTube, or our website, stroudsburgfaith.org. And again, I pray that if you don't have a church family to celebrate Advent and Christmas with, and maybe the time after that, I'd invite you to here to Faith United Methodist Church. Come down and join us for one of our worship services on Sundays. We usually have service at 8 and 10 a.m., and we're having a wonderful, blessed Christmas Eve service at 7 p.m. on Christmas Eve, December 24th. So if you don't have a church family to celebrate Christmas with, join us for that service. I would invite you. It's a wonderful time, and we would love to welcome you here to the Faith family. With all that shared, blessings and keep the faith, and we'll see you later.